Well, mixed signals and no backing down from Dan Bongino, the right-wing podcaster picked to serve as the new deputy director of the FBI. The former Secret Service agent has referred to the FBI as irredeemably corrupt. But while he suggested he's prepared to relinquish that MAGA warrior role, he also repeated a frequent and baseless charge that the DOJ has been weaponized.
I get it if you were a political opponent of mine that has been involved with proudly celebrating a weaponized justice system, how you don't understand how a guy like me who discusses partisan content in an opinion show can go and do a unquestionably nonpartisan job.
An NBC News review found that since 2017, Bongino's podcast has mentioned the FBI or deep state more than 21,000 times. Joining me now, NBC News Justice and Intel correspondent Ken Dilanian, along with Christopher O'Leary, former senior official at the FBI. Ken, I know you've been reporting on reaction inside the FBI over the choice of Bongino, including those who have told you that in many ways they think the deputy role is even more important than the director role. So talk about the kinds of concerns they're expressing to you.
Yeah, especially when you have a director like Kash Patel, who has no experience in the FBI, who is himself a partisan warrior with a history of criticizing the FBI. Agents were hoping that they would bring in a career FBI agent, has been true for the 117-year history of the Bureau, to be in the deputy role. The deputy actually runs operations. But instead, they brought in another partisan MAGA warrior. And not only that, somebody who has made baseless charges. I mean, just a few months ago, Chris, Dan Bongino accused the FBI of covering up the fact that he said that they knew who the suspect was who placed the pipe bombs outside the RNC and DNC the day before January 6th, after the FBI issued a public call for information saying they had no suspects. Dan Bongino said it's an inside job, it's a cover-up. That's just extraordinary. There's no evidence for that. He's accusing the FBI of being corrupt there, and now he's going to be the deputy director leading this organization. That's not a matter of opinion. That was a false charge that he made without evidence, and that's gotten a lot of people very concerned, Chris.
Chris, you spend a lot of time inside the building at the FBI. You know a lot of folks who still work there. Does it matter that the number one and number two don't have any FBI experience?
Well, it does, and the combination of the two is the really the most concerning part. So the deputy is supposed to have all of this operational experience at every level of the FBI across multiple types of threats, from counterterrorism, counterintelligence to violent crime. The director rises through the ranks and develops a network and leadership capability and understanding of the network and the interagency as they rise through the ranks. He's done none of that. It's great that he had a short career in the NYPD, working crime on the street level, but then he did protection for the Secret Service for a few more years. He's never done any investigations, nothing in national security, nothing working with the interagency. And the more problematic thing, the lack of experience coupled with his lack of suitability, his character flaws. I mean, there is no way that you're going to put 21,000 allegations back in the box against the FBI. So he's being rewarded with taking the helm at the FBI as the deputy after undermining the trust and confidence in its employees and the organization, the institution as a whole, for the last few years.
You know, there's one thing to talk about experience, but with that experience comes respect. Maybe even if you don't like the guy himself, right? If it's somebody who's been inside, who understands the working of whether it's the FBI or any other complex agency. But my limited experience around the FBI, these are not easy jobs. These are not places where you go, you clock in, and you leave, particularly for the front-facing people who are doing the investigations, the lawyers you and I were talking about in the break. How do you lead an agency? How do you run an agency without the respect of the people who are in it? And is it possible to win their respect, do you think, in this case?
So I don't think it's possible for him to win the respect of your average FBI agent or intelligence professional. Rob Kassane or Brian Driscoll, if they would have been asked to stay aboard as the deputy director, they would have enjoyed that. They have incredible reputations based on their work, based on operations. While Dan Bongino was running a podcast out of his basement, Rob Kassane was in East Africa with me. Brian Driscoll was in Syria with me hunting down ISIS. They built up a resume based on work. and partnerships. They're trusted teammates. And people know that they would go to bat for them, looking out for their welfare. They already demonstrated that. Nobody has any trust and confidence in Dan Bongino to do that. He clearly lacks the integrity to do that. He's demonstrated that. And he really doesn't believe in the FBI and its mission. My concern is they're looking to dismantle it.
So, Ken, you and your colleagues have been digging into Dan Bongino's years-long history of pushing conspiracy theories, criticism of the FBI. To Chris's point, that is a question a lot of people have. Is Dan Bongino there to run an agency or to dismantle it? What do his words over the past many years tell us about that?
Well, Chris, he has actually suggested, particularly after the Mar-a-Lago raid, he said repeatedly that the FBI should be disbanded. Irredeemably corrupt was the phrase that you cited. He said it's beyond repair, essentially. Now, he's not saying that right now, and, we'll have to see how it goes, but it's clearly you have two people now in charge of the FBI at the senior-most positions who have spent years denouncing the FBI and painting the specter of a deep state, a cabal within the FBI, without any evidence of that. And so now they're confronted. Now they're going to be inside. They're going to be running the place. Dan Bongino, the first time he's in public with reporters, he's going to be asked, well, can you tell us the name of the pipe bomber? You said that the FBI was covering that up, right? So he's either going to have to come clean and explain to his followers that the conspiracy theories he was trafficking in are false, or he's going to have to. It's going to be a total contradiction. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
Well, there's another option there, Chris, which is what we saw, for example, in the false theories that the 2020 election was stolen. We have evidence coming. We have tons of information. We have lots of evidence. They never actually showed it, right? But do you see that scenario happening? And how do you answer that?
So on day one, he's going to meet agents just like me. I was your average FBI agent. I'm a former Marine, a combat veteran who spent his entire life dedicated to this country, its protection, and the security of its citizens. Politics never entered into it. As a matter of fact, like most FBI agents, I'm probably a little more right-leaning, and I'm not a registered Republican, but I could very well be. Politics are never discussed. So he's going to meet people just like me and be confronted with the truth, which Kash Patel already knows. Dan Bongino is actually going to be confronted with it now. Does he admit his mistakes? Does he fall on his sword and communicate to his 8.5 million followers on his podcast that, oh, I had it all wrong? These are actually committed professionals dedicated to this country, which is what the FBI is.
I don't want to be hyperbolic, but are political leanings that might influence the way someone behaves in a role like an FBI agent or somebody who's charged with the security of this country, the enemy of the security of this country?
Well, I would know because politics never entered into it. It's kind of, I joke about it, but it's true. It's like going into a good Irish pub. No politics and no religion are discussed. It's just not considered appropriate for what you're doing. You conduct legal investigations based on the law. You conduct operations and arrests based on your mission, not based on any bias you may have. It's just factually inaccurate. And again, I'm not some liberal telling you this. I am like many other FBI agents, committed veteran, committed national security servant, and we're just committed to protecting this country and securing the Constitution.